discuss issues that are on your agenda for this session?
Unfortunately, the governor's been reluctant to. We reached out to his office. We're trying to get on his calendar since back in January when we released really our proposals in the caucus on issues that are critical concerns to our community. But for whatever reason, I've not heard a response back. So we're hopeful that before session really gets into full swing, we'll get a chance to sit down with the commission. It's been denial of people that job creation and 728,000 jobs in this country are impacting people in a positive way. I can take him in the walk through the Glades area in Palm Beach County. Show him folks that in the 5 years that he's been in office have not seen a reduction in the 40% unemployment that the region is currently facing. And so when you're talking about 4 out of every 10 people being unable to not only put food on the table, but to find a job that's empowered with job creation, Houston Democrats.
Thank you very much. Pleasure meeting.
The State Secretary of the Florida Alliance, not just the wealthy and the well-connected and the privileged few. It is also my honor and pleasure and privilege to introduce one of our heroes here in the hallowed halls of the Capitol, Senator Dwight Bullard, who will outline the 5-point policy proposal that Awake the State activists will put their collective efforts and energies behind this legislative session. Senator Bullard.
I'll briefly describe all 5. Number 1 is, of course, expand access to health care. We want to make sure that we implement an expansion of Florida's Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act to close Florida's coverage gap. Expansion would provide access to quality health care for nearly 1 million Floridians who lack basic health security today. And for those who have been historical naysayers, let's keep in mind that these 800,000 plus individuals are all members of a class of people known as the working poor, who are working every day, sometimes 32, 40 hours a week, but still not making enough to afford health care. Number 2 is to pass the Water Protection Act. Florida faces major challenges in both water quality and quantity and need to take substantial steps to protect our water. We must ensure clean, safe drinking water and restore the Everglades despite the efforts of polluters like Big Sugar to stand in the way of progress. The Department of Environmental Protection must protect our springs and require local governments to adopt seasonal fertilizer ordinances. The risky oil and gas extraction process known as fracking must be banned statewide to protect our water resources and public health. And I want to thank my colleagues here in Arizona for joining forces in attacking the ban on fracking. Number 3 is to pass the Clean Energy Act. This will require the state of Florida to receive 40% of its energy from non-nuclear renewable resources by 2030. Florida faces serious challenges due to the global threat of climate change, and we should immediately position our state to take advantage of increasingly affordable sources of renewable energy. And I want to highlight the work of my colleague and my classmate, Representative Raymond Vassalini Stanford, who's been working diligently to deal with renewables, as well as Representative Victor Torres, who will be joining me in trying to provide low-income renewable energy resources for Floridians. Next, number 4 is to pass a living wage amendment. This would allow for an amendment to the Florida Constitution raising the state's minimum wage to $15 per hour, indexed to inflation. Floridians who work hard should be able to pay for the basic needs like food, water, and of course shelter, and provide for their families. Number 5 is to pass the Anti-Corruption Act. This act will lower the individual campaign contribution limit to $250 and allow Floridians to contribute to state and local campaigns and request a rebate of up to $25. This proposal would restrict the influence of big money in campaigns, empower small donors, and provide the foundation for a more citizens-funded as opposed to a citizens-united style of election process. Awake the State is focused on putting citizens back in the halls of government where they belong. And the 5 priorities I've just outlined are the first steps needed to make Florida work for all Floridians, not just the wealthy and the well-connected. And now I'd like to introduce a veteran of Florida Chain and its advocacy director. I want to bring up Ms. Athena Ford. Thank you.
Florida Now, which is a coalition of over 100 or nearly 100 organizations across the state calling on lawmakers to expand Medicaid. Florida has the opportunity to accept tens of billions of dollars in order to cover uninsured Floridians. Most of the folks we're talking about can't be here today. That nearly 1 million Floridians that are caught in the Florida coverage gap, we're talking about working moms and dads, 40,000 veterans, nearly 300,000 young people, some of whom are going to school and trying to go to work. We're talking about working families that are caught in the coverage gap. These individuals, like all Floridians, deserve access to a doctor when they need to without the fear of enormous medical bills. What's especially shameful about being stuck in this coverage gap is that there's a common sense solution to this problem Florida doesn't have to be facing. So right now, we are offered tens of billions of dollars in order to extend healthcare coverage to these working Floridians. When it comes to this money, we either use it or we lose it. And for the past 2 years, Florida has failed to take advantage of this opportunity and close the coverage gap. Now 2 years in, come 2015, we're really facing the consequences of this missed opportunity. We've put our hospitals at real risk. We have threatened the lives and safety of nearly 1 million Floridians. And what we need to do now is move very quickly to accept these funds, to close the Florida coverage gap, protect our hospitals, create tens of thousands of new jobs, boost our economy, and most importantly, protect the health and economic security of some of our most hardworking and vulnerable Floridians. So we were glad to be invited here today, and we're proud to stand with others that call on our lawmakers to close the coverage gap in 2015. Thank you. Introduce Susan Glickman.
Good morning. I'm Susan Glickman. I'm the Florida Director of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I'm also representing Floridians for Solar Choice. Florida needs to make substantial progress in the area of moving clean energy. We need to because we face a crisis with global climate change and the buildup of greenhouse gas emissions, and we're on the front lines of sea level rise, and communities around the state are already dealing with this. But unfortunately, big monopoly utility companies, which give enormous amounts of money to legislators and to the governor, cabinet, political parties, have had a lock in Florida on clean energy. Very recently, the Florida Public Service Commission gutted energy efficiency in the state of Florida. We need to have energy that's affordable, and the cost of solar has come down exponentially, but we are one of only 5 states that does not allow the third-party sale of electricity. And we are in a situation where the utilities are rushing in a power plant building binge to put these major assets into their rate base so they can charge people for decades. Particularly low-income people pay a very high percentage of their disposable income on their energy bill. We are one of 5 states that does not allow for the third-party sale of electricity, and we're only one of a handful of states that has a burdensome, onerous tax on leased solar equipment. So around the country, people are taking advantage of the God-given resource of the sun. And in fact, in Florida, we have a very unusual coalition of people that span from the Tea Party to the Christian Coalition to retailers like Publix and Walmart, as well as groups like Southern Alliance for Clean Energy that are coming together and taking this issue to the people. The other issue that we have here in Florida that's energy related is the issue of water. We have water quality and water quantity issues, and power plants use 42% of the fresh water. It's more than agriculture. So every time we are more efficient with our energy or we move to solar, we are also saving water. And just recently, the Florida Public Service Commission allowed Florida Power and Light, the biggest utility in the state, to put a fracking company for risky fracking operations into their rate base. And that fracking is a problem not only here in Florida, but around the country. and we are putting chemicals in as they rush to use this fracking process to get more natural gas for more power plants. So the issue of energy and water are very linked. So I too would like to appreciate the legislators in the process, a number of them that are standing behind me, Michelle Renico-Vasalinda and Dwight Dudley, and others working on energy, and especially the Republicans that are moving forward, like Senator Jeff Brandy, Senator Latvala, and others that are recognizing the monopoly and how that's hurting people, both in their pocketbooks and with our environment as well. So we need to move on energy this session, and I appreciate the leadership of the legislators that are standing up for the consumers and the people around the state of Florida. And with that, I would like to bring up Rich Templin.
Good afternoon. I just watched, like many of you, by the level of self-delusion that was on display in many of those remarks. Here's the reality about Florida being #1 and being #1 for business. Minimum wage, if it had kept up with inflation, $18.75 an hour. That's if it had kept up with productivity. $28 an hour. That's the minimum wage if it had matched the income growth for the top 1% in Florida. 35. That's the average age of minimum wage workers in our state. 55% of those are full-time workers. 28% have children. 45% are the primary earners for their families. Rick Scott says, let's keep working. We've created 728,000 jobs. Why didn't you point out that 60% of all those jobs created do not pay a living wage here in the state of Florida? It is time, finally, for the big business lobby and the lawmakers who serve them to give up their myopic view of business in Florida and embrace the indisputable facts that economists and post-industrial nations all over the world have realized that raising wages for these workers, the real job creators, the real engines of the economy, it's not just morally right, it isn't just good for these workers, but it's good for all Floridians and our economy. An economy currently shackled by income inequality and the failed trickle-down economic policies of the 1920s, the 1980s that led directly to the Great Depression. And if legislators refuse to act, instead of continuing to cow down to the lobbying forces of selfish short-term gain, then it's time for the people to amend Florida's Constitution to raise the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour, keeping it indexed to inflation, so when we finally get out of the current hole that millions of Floridians find themselves in, we never go back. Now, we can't do any of the things that we're talking about with real reform in our ethics system here in Tallahassee, campaign finance reform, and to talk a little bit about that, I'd like to introduce Peter Butzine with Common Cause.
Thank you. My name is Peter Butzine. I'm the state chair of Common Cause Florida, and I also serve on its national governing board. One issue, the one issue, that prevents government from working for the people, for the 99%, if you will, as opposed to the 1%, is the obscene method that we use for funding our political campaigns. Inclusive health care for all, proper stewardship of our environmental resources, sustainable clean energy, a living wage, and a decent standard of living for all Floridians will continue to be illusory as long as we have special economic interests that have an undue influence on our public policy making process. A study by Integrity Florida found that our state is the most corrupt in the nation, based on 781 federal corruption convictions from the year 2000 to 2010. This is the most of any state. Clearly, more must be done to curtail corruption and to ensure Florida state government is working in an open and transparent manner. And that's why Florida must limit the influence of big money in campaigns by passing a statewide anti-corruption act. Our proposal would lower individual campaign contributions to $250 and it would allow Floridians who contribute to state or local campaigns to request a rebate from the state of up to $25. The Anti-Corruption Act echoes November's own Tallahassee referendum, in which 67% of Tallahassee voters passed to reduce the influence of money in politics and to enact tough new ethics laws. We're no longer waiting for Congress or even the Florida legislature to solve this most pressing problem. We're ready to take back America one city at a time if necessary. This is a critical step toward good government and will help us to enact the other parts of the Awake the States agenda by empowering citizens and by reducing the influence of wealthy special interests.
The threat is, we want a Florida that works for every Floridian, not just the privileged few, those who have money and power. And a lot of people think that people like us and the 99% have no power, but people like me know differently. We all have power if we just learn to use it, and that's our job, to teach people to bring that power out and to go out and organize. I get sick and tired of hearing people on Facebook and the internet whine about the state of this state. No more mourning, let's just organize. Well, I think you've heard the speakers talk about the state of the state. We have a lot of uninsured people who are workers, who are working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs and can't even afford health care.
Think of some of the numbers that I just shared. Those are verifiable anyway. The fact that 45% of households in this state are struggling. They are what are considered asset-limited, income-constrained employed. These are people that are working every day at the jobs that the governor just celebrated who can't put food on the table. Why are people not staggered by that number? Almost half of the households in Florida are struggling. That's the real state of the state right now.
Energy issues. What we say is if you're not mad, you're not paying attention. Because Florida consumers could be making their homes more energy efficient. And in the same 2-week period, the Florida Public Service Commission killed energy efficiency programs in the state of Florida and then gave Duke Energy approval to build a new 1,640 megawatt gas plant. And because of a misguided law that allows you to collect for nuclear power plants, my community, where Duke Energy represents 1.6 million people, they're taking about $5 billion from their failed business decisions, both at Crystal River and when they started to charge people for power plants that won't get built. And then we have the nerve to somehow say that solar energy and energy efficiency hurts poor people. It's simply not true. What hurts poor people are paying for power plants that won't get built and paying for power plants and pipelines and other infrastructure that we don't need. So that's what hurts poor people. So if you're not mad, you are not paying attention.
Joyce Dudley, State Representative from St. Petersburg. One of the things that has already happened that's pretty outrageous that not many Floridians are aware of is the PSC has granted 190 Florida Power and Light the right to take $191 million from ratepayers to help with production of natural gas and oil on the Woodford Shale. This is a place where Florida has no jurisdiction to control what happens. As part of that big ask in taking additional money from ratepayers is a request for $750 million annually from ratepayers for 50 years. That's $37 billion. You know, where's the outrage about the departure from basic capitalism, basic free markets, you know, risk and reward? All the risk is on ratepayers. All the reward is with the big companies that are certainly capable of financing the operations that they're engaging in. So that's an outrageous thing. It puts energy policy in the wrong direction, and it's something we need to fix this session. Leaders need to step up and pass a law to ban these joint ventures that are harming consumers.